There she goes again. She cries every time you leave the house. Right, Mithra?
I don't know what to do when she cries.
You concentrate on making the world a safe place for her. You're at your best when you're fighting for what's right. Please. Save her.
I will.
Hey there. You know what's fun about growing up in the rural South? The dialects. You don't get a lot of exposure to other cultures either. That's not a fun thing, that's a different thought. The point is, I'm going to be talking about a game here that has a lot of Hindu and Buddhist and some Japanese influences. And if I have to stop and apologize for my pronunciation every time I do it wrong, this video will be 2 hours long. So, I am sorry, it's the best I can do. We all just lucky I ain't talking like this. Asura's Wrath is visually one of the coolest games I've ever played. Let me give you an example.
Asura the traitor! Asura the destructor! You do not belong in this world! Die!
So that's pretty neat, right? You might think that I just hit you with a major spoiler, but no, that's the first boss. A normal day at the office for Asura is to beat to death a god 10 times the size of the planet. The game is cinematic, beautifully animated, and masterfully composed. It has an interesting story, compelling characters, and awesome set pieces, so it's a shame that they put all that work into it, and I still can't really recommend it. I'm getting ahead of myself though. In case you don't know, Asura's Wrath is a button-mashing quick-time event simulator developed by CyberConnect 2 and published by Capcom. It was released in 2012 for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, and then they just left it there. It didn't even get a PC port, so if you do want to play this one, backwards compatibility on the Xbox is the only modern way. I think you can also try it through streaming on PlayStation Network, but I can't imagine that working well for 99% of the world. CyberConnect 2 is an interesting developer. Before this game, they were mostly known for the PS2 Dot Hack Quadrilogy and Dot Hack GU, as well as the Naruto Ultimate Ninja and Ninja Storm series. Since Asura's Wrath, they've stayed mostly in the same lane, developing anime-inspired RPGs and fighting games, including Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. As for Capcom, well, let's just say this isn't the Capcom of your youth that was putting out bangers like Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4. Nor is it the Capcom of the 2020s putting out fantastic games like Resident Evil 2 and 4. No, this is Capcom in its villain arc when it released Resident Evil 6, DMC, Devil May Cry, Monster Hunter Tri, and Dead Rising 3. They were also aggressively pissing away goodwill from their fans with microtransactions and predatory DLC, which is actually relevant to this game too, but we'll get there, just give me a minute, Jesus. On top of all that, it wasn't entirely clear from the marketing what this game was meant to be. Trailers had a suspicious lack of actual gameplay, and despite reviewing well in Japan, Western critics' feelings on it were pretty mixed. All this is to say that Asura's Wrath was released into an uphill battle, and for once, it wasn't a fight that could be won by being really, really angry. Sales were poor, and there hasn't been a sequel, but it's been sitting in my library for years just staring at me with those smoldering eyes, so let's get into it. In this game, you take on the role of Asura, voiced by the ever-fabulous Liam O'Brien if you're on the English dub. Sadly, he doesn't talk a ton, but I'm sure it felt good to be in the booth just giving it a big ol'. You know, before the pandemic, I worked in an office and I listened to so much Critical Role that I started having dreams that I would play D&D with the cast, but I wasn't very good at the game and they all laughed at me. I would wake up brutally depressed about it. This led to me obsessively reading the 5th edition rule set so that I would be ready just in case. If that seems like too much information, Asura's Wrath has the opposite problem. It's not going to give you any information at all. In fact, you'll start the game in space in the midst of a titanic battle against forces unknown. I am aware this is a storytelling technique called in medias res, and it's supposed to throw you right into an exciting part of the story to hook you, but personally, I just think it's kind of annoying to have no clue what's happening. I like to know how we got here, so I can be invested in the action. So, let's start at the beginning. In the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Unless you're Hindu, in which case the word was Om. And it was probably good too. I'm no religious scholar, but for the sake of our conversation here, we'll say that Hindus believe that Om is the sound of the divine. It's the sound of the creation of the universe, and it's also known as a mantra. Or at least that's what the internet tells me. Believe it or not, I am not actually Hindu. I know, I was surprised too. There are tons of examples of mantra, but the idea is that it is a sacred utterance, divine noise, like the Burnout 3 soundtrack. Most people would associate them with Hinduism, Buddhism, and of course Christianity. It can be a singular sound, a word, or a phrase, but generally it has a spiritual significance. Mantra in the game still has that background of religious symbolism, but overall it's just whatever the writers needed it to be. It exists in all living things to some extent, but you could think of it as magic, divine power, electricity, scientific knowledge, chakra, ki, and Viagra. On a planet that is probably Earth, but way back in the past, so it's called Gaia, ancient humans were living in mud huts and eating their boogers until the god of all creation chose to give some of them the power to control mantra. This group of people essentially became superhuman, stronger, faster, able to fly, and basically immortal. They called themselves the demigods, and normal humans worshipped them, so those prayers gave them even more mantra to become stronger, and they quickly conquered the world. If you remember, I said that mantra also counts as electricity and scientific knowledge or inspiration. Because the demigods had more mantra, their technology advanced rapidly, and their civilization developed massive flying cities, spaceships, and weapons of war. It was sort of like Atlantis, I guess. The demigod nation was known as Shinkoku Trastrium, and its capital was Shinto, which is also the name of the indigenous religion of Japan. I wonder if there's something to that. So much of this game is based around these themes of Hindu and Buddhist mythology. You'd think the demigods would be called Devas, and the city would be Amarvati, the capital of the Deva nation in Hindu mythology. Anyway, Shinto is the home of the demigod emperor and the strongest members of the military, and you might wonder why a civilization of superhumans needs a military when every other human is still wiping themselves with leaves. And that brings us to the Goma. The meteoric rise of technological progress resulted in massive pollution, and at the same time the demigods found that they could capture the souls of humans and turn them into even more mantra energy. This prevented the souls from returning to the life stream, and Gaia did not like these two developments. Gaia isn't a goddess in this story, it's just the name of the planet, but apparently the planet has feelings now, and when it's mad, it starts making monsters. Goma look like corrupted animals, kinda like that boar god from Princess Mononoke, but they're really a solidified spirit energy that Gaia is using like white blood cells to try and get rid of the demigods. Rather than recognize that this change in their planet's climate is a direct consequence of their own actions, the demigods seek out more mantra to fuel their technology and ever more luxurious way of life. I wish I could think of a comparison for this, but I'm drawing a blank. Of course, this just angers the planet more and causes stronger Goma to be created. Eventually, a massive super Goma appears called Vlitra. killing humans and demigods en masse until Shinto's greatest warriors are able to defeat it. Unfortunately, they aren't strong enough to kill it, just put it to sleep for a while. And this cycle of violence is known as the War of Creation. It's been going on for thousands of years. The leaders of the demigod army are known as the 8 generals, and each is given an affinity to a specific category of mantra. From what I can tell, this isn't based on any real religious concept other than maybe the 7 deadly sins. You might have guessed by the fact that there are 8 generals that there are 8 affinities of mantra. I don't think it would be controversial with all 5 of the Asura's Wrath fans out there to say that this concept feels a little underbaked. Our leading man Asura's affinity is Wrath, believe it or not, and the other 7 are Pride, Lust, Vanity, Greed, Violence, Melancholy, and Sloth. This might be a function of a weird translation, but that seems like strange pillars to set up as the foundation of your mystical power system, elevating the worst parts of the human condition. It would make sense for a league of villains, obviously, but everyone's the hero in their own story, right? Why would you call yourself the god of sloth? There's a fair amount of overlap in the affinities too. Vanity and pride, wrath and violence, lust and greed. And even aside from that, Asura seems to be the only demigod that actually becomes more powerful in relation to his affinity. The general of melancholy doesn't get stronger by being sad, and even the violence guy is openly mocked as being the weakest of the generals. But he's violence, why would he be weak? While we're on it, I don't understand the generals in general. Like I said, I don't think the developers were working in an established historical religious structure, so they could have picked different mantras anyway, but the characters don't fit their own affinities either. Here's what I mean. So there's a general of violence, right? Who do you think it is? Would you guess that it's August, the giant beefcake guy with the huge sword that's constantly talking about how much he likes fighting? No. How silly of you. What about Wizen, the big fat guy? He's gotta be Sloth, right? Wrong again. Violence is the big fat guy. Sloth is this little old man named Calro because he thinks up plans and gets other people to do the work for him. And no, I don't expect you to remember these names. I barely can, and I played the game and wrote this video about it. Okay, so back to the muscle-bound Monkey King. August is always talking about how much he loves fighting and beautiful women. So maybe he's lust? He lusts for battle, wine, and sex. No, that's Olga, because she's the only woman on the team, I guess. It had to be that or vanity, right? Olga is lust, and her entire character is that she simps for pride. His name is Deus, and he's the leader of the Scooby Gang. August is greed. Why? If you're really married to these character designs, you could just change the name of the mantras around. It's not like anyone would know. Yasha is melancholy, and he's the Sasuke to our Naruto, and he's Ashura's brother-in-law. Vanity is named Sergei, and he emits a vibe that I can only call I microwaved a family pet. It wouldn't take long to look at these characters, the way they interact with each other and the humans, and realize that the idea of gods in this game is built around power instead of benevolence or some kind of true divinity. Even still, there's gotta be some better way to break out the 8 character archetypes that makes more sense. Where's jealousy or deceit or schadenfreude? Let me fight Sonder. Alright, so now you're more or less caught up on how we got to here, the very first scene in the game. So what's the game like? Well, it takes all that inspiration from a bunch of Eastern religions and throws them in a blender with the coolest scenes from your favorite anime. So you could imagine that for the first quarter of the game, I thought it was amazing, and I didn't understand why I hadn't ever heard anyone talk about it. It's trying to sell that shonen jump anime man too angry to die power fantasy, and I think it does it pretty well. It even gives some of the enemies power levels like the early Dragon Ball Z arcs. It's broken up into episodes that are a few minutes long. Those episodes have recaps, outros, credits, and even the commercial bumpers in the middle. I thought that was a really nice touch. Graphically, the game has a cel-shaded painterly style that wouldn't look out of place in one of those 3D Netflix anime that we all like to pretend don't exist. Cutscenes are framed like a TV show, but instead of getting to enjoy them, you'll have to be on constant alert for QTEs. Episodes run the full depth of anime tropes, from sappy flashbacks to a hot springs episode. Oh, we'll get to it. And seasons end with a nice punchy cliffhanger. Like I said, it's a game that is also an anime. It might be fair to say that it's a game that should have been an anime instead. It might have been better that way, but here we are, and it's time to fight a planet. Asura leaps into space and plummets towards Gaia through flying hordes of Goma. Even these big rocks are apparently like spaceships full of the things. I'm not really sure why the will of the planet would be trying to colonize Mars though. Things seem to be going pretty well until the head General Deus gives the order to fire the Brahmastra. At this point, I had gathered from the big floating religious symbol that we were doing a Hindu thing, and I know that Brahman is a type of bull, so myself, being a type of moron, thought this was some kind of cow cannon, but the Brahmastra is in fact a legendary weapon in Hindu mythology that you could just call the one-upper. It's the fireball that destroys everything, ever, no takebacks, times infinity, my dad could beat up your dad. In this game, it's a giant space prayer laser that cracks open the planet like an egg and just lets all of that hot eggussy juice flow out. Unfortunately, this egg was fertilized, and Vlitra pokes its head out and opens its mouth, spewing fire and wiping out presumably like a billion demigods, I don't know. Things get pretty hyperbolic in this game. I did love this visual of Vlitra though. Like Deus tried to tell the planet to bite the pillow, and the planet said, "No, you." Asura flies at Vlitra, but he's overwhelmed by the deadly lasers. It's looking like a bad day at the office, but a priestess that we don't know yet leads a prayer for his victory and sends him energy for the spirit bomb. This is Mithra. She's Asura's daughter and the priestess of the demigods. In demigod civilization, there can be only one priestess at a time, and they alone have the power to amplify mantra energy. Asura cracks open a Red Bull full of the power of friendship, and it gives him wings, or, more arms. Hey, do you think it's just a coincidence that he's got like 6 hands and there are 6 other dudes on the team? Now with 3 times the punching power, Asura flies to Vlitra and wallops it on the nose, putting it back to sleep. He returns home a hero to his wife and daughter, and we learn that he's made out of wood or something. I thought everyone was supposed to look like that, but his wife's just a normal lady, so I guess it's just the fighters. I mean, I know why, but you don't because this game doesn't tell you anything. We'll get to it, okay? The reunion is cut short when Asura gets called away to see the Emperor. The Emperor of the Demigods is an incredibly old man, but recently he's become an incredibly fresh corpse. So fresh, in fact, that he's still bleeding when he falls and Asura catches him. With the Emperor's blood on his hands and no good alibi, Asura is accused of the murder. He fights his way out of the palace, but it slows him down, and by the time he makes it back home, his wife lies dying on the floor and his daughter has been taken. With the entire world against him, he faces the other generals only to find out that they were the ones who betrayed him. Unfortunately, he's not strong enough to drop a deuce, and instead he's killed and tossed down to Gaia like trash, because while demigods are immortal, they are not actually invulnerable, and you should keep that in mind if you ever run across a genie. Hey, wait a minute. A demigod with a dead family whose anger makes him stronger is betrayed by the gods and goes on a bloody quest for revenge. That sounds familiar. Hey Capcom, isn't this just Kratos? Yeah, from the God of War games. No, the old ones. Alright, I'll tell him. They said no, it's a different religion. Awakening in Naraka, that's kinda like hell for Hindus, I guess. Asura meets a golden talking spider. He's lost his memories, but the spider encourages him to climb up the tower he's hanging onto, back to the land of the living. The amnesia thing was a really strange inclusion, and it makes me wonder if I'm missing some kind of subtle joke, because seconds later as he's climbing, Asura has a flashback to his training with August, and that's gotta count as a memory, right? He rediscovers his own name, and then he goes into another flashback where he remembers the whole betrayed by his comrades that murdered his wife and stole his daughter thing. So, what was the point of the amnesia arc? Driven by his fury, Asura runs up the pillar on all fours. I used to have dreams like that too. Finally, he erupts from the ground, exploding with power and screaming his defiance to a blasted wasteland. Blinded by his rage, his eyes shine with a furious light. But that's kind of weird, because August has the same eyes, and I don't think he's blinded by greed. Apparently, he's just actually blind, and his eyes do that on their own. Looking out over the world, the ground is barren, the skies are covered with a black miasma, and there are no signs of life. This is another reference, this time to the mythological city of Delhi, India. The voice of the spider comes to him again and says that 12,000 years have passed since he was thrown down from the heavens, and Asura drops what might be the coldest line in the game.
Is this how you save the world? This place looks like hell.
He's talking about Deus here. Deus killed him, killed his wife, and kidnapped his daughter. He's had 12,000 years of peace, and the planet is in ruins. What was it all for? If you're the type to avoid spoilers, now's probably the time to cut out or skip ahead. While I do have criticisms of the game, it was still pretty enjoyable, and you've seen how it plays, so you can probably tell if it looks like something you'd like. But you don't need to play coy with me. We're already pretty far into this one. Might as well see what happens. Asura wanders the world and finds a nearby village, but not long after he arrives, the Goma attack and he rushes to defend the humans. While he's fighting, a group of demigod soldiers drop from the sky, making sure to crush a few people on the way down, as a treat. Instead of fighting the Goma, they're clearly just here for Asura, but our boy is well rested after such a long nap. Finally, Wizen, the general of violence, crashes down to take him on directly. Now, Asura apparently hasn't gotten all of his memories back, and he does his best Solid Snake impression.
Who are you?
Do not tell me you have forgotten everything. How could you forget the great Wizen?
Wizen?
Kneel before one of the 7 deities!
The 7 deities?
What about the Pentagon?
Pentagon?
Surgical implants in my brain.
Surgical implants?
I guess it's in the genes.
The genes?
But I really appreciate this little option up in the corner. Asura's mad as hell, and when someone starts monologuing in this game, it really feels appropriate that there's a shut up button. They should put that in more games. This is our first boss fight, and it sets a pretty high bar, going through multiple phases as Wizen goes through his mandatory bad guy power levels, and it even includes possibly the harshest teabagging in known history. Asura has taken a pounding, but the memory of his daughter ignites his passions again. He whips out the bro beaters and gets ready to finish off the biggest man he's ever seen, getting way up in Wizen's guts before launching him into space. Wizen's not done yet though. He's rock hard and ready for round 2. He mentions the mantra reactor here, and that's meaningful, but I didn't catch it on my first playthrough, so we'll come back to it later. He's also the only deity that does this ultimate transformation thing, even though the others act like he was the weakest. I'm not sure if maybe the other generals were supposed to have multiple phases and it had to be cut out in development, or if the implication was that the rest of them didn't want to waste the mantra that they had stored up to fight Vlitra, but it's kinda weird that it's never really brought up again. The finger of God coming down to squish Asura has got to be one of the coolest scenes I've witnessed in gaming. The sense of scale and power is totally ridiculous, and the idea that Asura, proportionally the size of a flea, would still stand up to it is pretty epic. It's just a little dragged down by the fact that I still have to do QuickTime events instead of enjoying the spectacle. Asura throws everything he has at Wizen's fingers, shredding his own arms apart as he keeps punching against an unstoppable force, until I guess nuclear fission occurs? This causes a chain reaction that obliterates Wizen entirely, leaving Asura broken and unarmed, but hey, he still won. It's a short-lived victory though, as Yasha shows up to finish the job. Still determined to fight despite his handicaps, it ends up with Asura being cut in half and sinking into lava. I guess he's dead for good this time. Back in Naraka, we meet the Golden Spider again, and I worried that I was seeing a pattern emerge. If we're just going to keep popping out of the ground like Pikmin, then it sucks some of the drama out of those big fights, even if we all do know that the main character never really dies in the middle of a game. Well, don't worry. This is the last time we'll be down here. It does make it kind of weird that we're here at all, though. It seems like Asura could have just passed out after the fight with Wyzen and woke up later with his wounds healed and the spider nearby. He's a demigod, and they probably have super healing or something as long as they don't fully die, right? We get more flashbacks to fill in the backstory. We learn that August trained Asura and Yasha before they became generals, and they didn't really get along because of their different personalities. He didn't really get along with any of the other generals either, apparently, and I get that. Look at these guys. You want to hang out with the personification of sloth, violence, and vanity? It's like a reaction YouTuber convention. We also see that he struggled as a father, unsure of how to comfort his daughter and afraid to hurt her.
Even one of the 8 guardian generals is no match for his own daughter, is he?
She's so small.
Do you know what I think? I believe that you only wish the best for our daughter.
It's one of the better character moments in the game, and I think it really highlights how much we missed out on by starting at the climax of that battle, instead of having some time to establish the setting. 500 years after Yasha cut him in half, Asura revives again. This time he's in a shrine that was built around his corpse with a girl who looks a lot like his daughter. The Goma show up to kidnap her and destroy another village, and at this point you've kinda gotta wonder, do the Goma just show up when the demigods are around? You know that saying, if you meet one asshole, they're an asshole, but if everyone you meet is an asshole, you're an asshole? Everyone Asura meets gets kidnapped and murdered. Anyway, he saves who he can before another general shows up. This time it's Carlo, the general and now deity of sloth. In true lazy fashion, though, he didn't actually show up to the party. He just lets his soldiers do all the work. The entire sloth section feels kinda like filler. The only thing you really learn is that the deities have been killing humans and taking their souls to convert them into mantra. And of course this makes Asura even more angry. They try to kill the girl who looks like his daughter. She doesn't have a name as far as I know, so that's what I have to call her. But he saves her and beats them all up. You might have noticed that she's been carrying a baby this whole time, but when the fight's over, she doesn't have a baby anymore. And as far as I can tell, we never see it again. I guess the implication is supposed to be that they got the baby she was carrying, but not her. Anyway, Asura takes down Carlo's fleet and tries to confront him, but he's already in the process of running away. Not to beat Schrodinger's dead horse here, but I don't think you would have lost anything by making Wyzen sloth, let August be violence, and replacing greed with cowardice for Carlo. As he flies away in his escape pod, Asura catches up and crushes him to death in a big hug, showing that he can be both a lover and a fighter. The escape pod explodes, and despite Asura taking hits like this, and getting right back up, this knocks him out and he crashes to the ground. I'll give you a warning, the game did not bother to give me. If you've got small kids or nosy parents in the room, you might want to hide the screen for this next part, because it's time for the Hot Springs episode. Asura wakes up completely naked, floating in water, and no, we don't get to see his wrath. His old mentor August brought him here, and he's ready to brawl balls out, but August has other plans. I'm probably gonna have to censor this for YouTube, aren't I? Hilariously, like every other episode of the game, you have to fill up the burst meter, but instead of fighting, you do it by drinking and flirting with the bath attendant. I thought maybe I could skip through this section with the stand-up option, but instead Asura gets bashful when the lady looks at his junk and sits back down, I guess. Once the bar is full, well, I'll just show it to you, I guess. I'm not monetized anyway.
Lord have mercy, I'm about to bust.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to pretend this didn't make me laugh, because it is ridiculous, but it's still kind of weird the game forces you to attempt to fondle a bath attendant. I tried going through the mission again without drinking to see if it would be different, but no, it's still weird and gropey. As always, I stand by the player's right to goon, let there be lewd, whatever. I don't want to be forced to do it though. And even more than that, if we're just counting the time he's been alive, Asura's wife was murdered like 12 hours ago. He's still literally blind with rage. I don't really care either way about the scene, but if they really needed to keep it in, I would rather they have let Asura wake up next to August in the hot spring, let them talk for a little while, and then do this scene in a flashback to a time before he met his wife. Again, I'm not a prude, it's just kinda lazy, herder titties writing. Anyway, Asura and August talk for a while, and then it's time to throw down. But wait, let's take this somewhere we won't be interrupted. They tried to get into a Concord lobby, but the game shut down, so how about the moon? Yeah, that joke will age well. After a little warm-up, things get serious and August pulls out his weapon.
I have had carnal knowledge of the fairest maidens in heaven.
Alright man, we get it, you pull ladies. The sword does the whole power pull thing in case it wasn't obvious enough that this guy is based on Sun Wukong, who was also the inspiration for Goku. There's some dramatic yelling as August forces Asura off the moon and back down to Earth.
This is why we exist. But all good things must come to an end. You knew this was coming. This is where real men belong. In the fight, I don't give a damn. Only the strong survive. I taught you that much. That is not for you to decide. Only one fighter can walk away alive! I'll rip out your blind eyes! I don't fight for good! And I don't fight for evil! I just fight! I will say it once more. I am you, and you are me! I am nothing like you.
It's a scene that would give Sephiroth a stiffy, but I can't help laughing at how Asura's arms just keep popping off like Buzz Lightyear. They're really getting their money's worth out of that no-arms character model, though. Asura breaks the blade, catches it in his teeth, and slices August's belly for what seems like a pretty unlikely win, but okay. Before he can even take a breather, a giant Goma rises over the horizon, and Asura flies off with the sword in his teeth to kill it like he didn't just take 8,000 miles of steel in his small intestines. That's 13,000 coward meters if you're not American. In the base game, it skips forward a few days, but if you've bought the DLC, you get an episode here that's even more like a traditional anime, though it's a little psychedelic. There are 2 of these, and I wouldn't say that they're bad levels, but they don't really add anything to the story either, and I don't think you'd miss not having them. Back in the base game, the human girl finds Asura turned to stone, but she rubs a little prayer on it and he just walks it off. He won't be doing any handstands though. They travel to another village because that's always gone well in the past, and Olga, the deity of lust, shows up. She's not here to mess around with speeches or to find out who's stronger. She just brings a little American diplomacy and carpet bombs the whole city. Asura isn't a fan of this, but it becomes a real problem when the girl who's been following him around comes back with another random kid. Where does she... You know what? It doesn't matter. She's dead now, and Asura is feeling how Asura feels about things like that. Look, there's only so many ways that I can say he gets even angrier. Tired of going Super Saiyan, he releases 4 of the fox's 9 tails, and it's pretty neat. Several hours ago it would have been awesome, but with the exception of the hot springs scene, we've been at the same level of intensity for a really long time. And I don't know about you, but my stuff's getting numb and a little sore. Asura demonstrates to Olga's fleet what the fox says, and they go up like dust in a campfire. In a desperate attempt to stop him, she calls in the Karma Fortress for a Brahmastra orbital strike. And this doesn't sit well with Yasha, the deity of whining all the time. Killing his sister and Asura and kidnapping his niece and then sitting on his thumb for 12,000 years while they murdered 7 trillion humans is one thing, but now they've gone too far. All of that was okay because it was supposed to stop Vlitra. Now, Olga wants to waste all of that on Asura, as if he wouldn't just come back from the dead again anyway. So now we play as Yasha, which could have been a cool change of pace, except he does everything exactly the same as Asura. He tries to stop her, but he doesn't quite make it in time. Still, he kicks a space station in the face, and Asura just gets lightly toasted. After this massive betrayal, basically nothing happens. Deus orders Yasha to go with Sergei, the deity of vanity, for a purification. Yasha tries to stop the Goma that are attacking a human city, but the goal all along was just to take all the human souls. So they get carpet bombed anyway, and Sergei makes fun of him for caring about the humans. He goes through his whole "I'm obviously very evil" monologue until Asura shows up, still in berserker mode, and tears open his stomach. On the verge of death, Sergei's only concern is making sure that we all know he's so very evil. He reveals that he was the one who killed Yasha's sister and Asura's wife, but then Yasha just admits that he already knew that. Then Asura slams him on the ground and gives him the American History X. And that's it. He's done. And that kinda sucks, right? Are you familiar with the concept of fridging? If you don't know, fridging is when another character, usually a woman, suffers some kind of terrible violence for no other reason than to motivate the main and usually male characters. That's what Asura's wife is. She's not a character, she's just a reason for him to be angry. And she's not even the main reason. Let me ask you a question. What's Asura's wife's name? I haven't said it yet in the video. Did you notice? Her name is Durga, and she doesn't matter. She should, but she doesn't. His main purpose is to save his daughter, not to avenge his wife, even though it could have been both of those things. And I think that's a missed opportunity. We spent more time focused on the bath girl's tits than on the man who murdered our wife in cold blood. Anyway, Yasha has to fight Asura again, but this time we're controlling him, and as Asura gets angrier, his own power is destroying his body, which is also a thing that happened in Naruto, but that's okay. Yasha beats the black off him and he passes out. Now, you can do that second anime DLC story, but it's basically just Yasha going to fight Deus and getting kicked around for a little bit. Asura wakes up and follows him. Deus is the final deity, and his affinity is pride. In this game, it's claimed that pride is the strongest aspect of Mantra, and demigods aligned with pride are the ones destined to rule, but I think that's kind of circular logic. He's pretty strong though. He's even able to stand up to both Asura and Yasha for a little while, but eventually he fuses with the Karma Fortress, and it looks cool, but it doesn't really do anything because Asura started this game killing big blue dudes in space, so you're gonna need something better than that. The boys fly into the core of the fortress and see Asura's daughter Mithra hanging from some cables where she's been forced to act as a giant battery for 12,000 years. Deus is stronger here, but when Asura hears his daughter cry, he gets mad, and you know what that means. Mithra is saved and Asura can finally relax for a minute. Except literally the next second, Vlitra explodes out of the planet like the worst hemorrhoid you can imagine. Now it's got a bunch of snake heads that shoot lava, but I keep thinking about how many millions of people were just chilling out down there, picking their nose, and then suddenly they were in outer space. Completing the circle, Asura and Yasha fly towards Vlitra, destroying Goma and getting absolutely wrecked by lasers, until Mithra sends thoughts and prayers. This, I don't know, unlocks his Bankai, I guess? He gets new arms again. Together, they blow through Vlitra's face and land at its core where the will of the planet takes on physical form. But it's pretty much just the four-tailed fox again. You might get the impression from my tone through this section that the game is losing steam. And for me, it kind of is. But the bigger problem is just that things have become very, very repetitive. It takes a lot of work hours to make characters and animations and scenery for games, and I totally respect that. But making a 3-hour game a 6-hour game by doing it twice isn't really the answer to me. And I would have rather had 3 great hours than 6 mediocre ones. With the core defeated, we've saved the day. Yep, finally. Gaia is at peace and the humans can live happily ever after. Asura returns to his daughter and the credits roll for the last time, but wait, there's more. If you get an S rank in any 5 chapters, you unlock the secret ending, but you have to play the last chapter again, and that actually kinda sucks. It's exactly the same, except at the last minute, Olga shows up and, I kinda forgot about her. She tries to kill Mithra, but she's wrapped up in golden spider web and instantly killed. Then the spider wraps Mithra up in threads too, and when she comes out, it's taken over her body, because that kid really cannot catch a break. Spider Mithra declares itself the one true god of all creation, and then the game ends again. If you played Asura's Wrath on release, this was the end of the game for you, and I imagine that would be really frustrating. The final chapters and the true ending are locked behind DLC. You can still buy that DLC on Xbox, and I think it's still available on the PS3 store as of this writing. But if you played the streamed version through PlayStation Plus on PS4, there's no DLC available for you, so I guess go kick rocks, nerd. Chakravartin is the name of the spider and also the hardest name in this game, and he tells Asura that he gave the demigods the power of mantra and also caused Gaia to create the Goma. All the misery and the war, the trillions of dead humans, him helping Asura's climb out of Naraka, and even Mithra being kidnapped, when you get right down to it, it was all just his way of finding a new god to rule over this world so he could leave because he was bored. Now, Asura is just the demi-man for the job. As you might imagine, Asura isn't a fan of this management style, and he declines the offer. So Chakravartin destroys the Karma Fortress and decides to just start the whole planet over from scratch. Asura is nearly dead after trying to fight with the Lord of all creation, so Yasha carries him to the wreckage of the Karma Fortress and pulls out that little light thing from Iron Man's chest. This is the mantra reactor. If you remember, Wyzen yelled that out before he transformed in the first fight. It's some kind of mantra regulation system. I don't know, it's really not explained. And neither is the fact that Asura has actually been a cyborg this whole time. I mean, yes, in retrospect, the signs were there, but I just thought his arms had been replaced like Jax from Mortal Kombat. Apparently, the demigods are given a mantra reactor at birth, and it starts replacing parts of their body with machinery. The parts they use most, like for combat, become increasingly metallic. And I guess from taking hits all the time, that's why their skin looks weird. Anyway, the Karma Fortress mantra reactor is a super special one. Yasha opens Asura's chest and gives him the upgrade, and then rips out his own reactor and uses it as a jumper. The idea here is that when Asura uses his full power, it destroys his body, so the new reactor will help regulate it so he can fight without tearing himself apart. Asura wakes up to Yasha punching him in the face, but he's probably used to that by now. We see another flashback to them fighting in the past, and that one ended in a tie, but back in the present, Yasha dies from losing his reactor before they can decide a winner. Finally, we get just one small moment of quiet and humanity. Then Asura gets on a rocket and flies into space to face Chakravartin again, this time in the center of the Milky Way. He tanks a laser meant to destroy Gaia and then has to blow through several planets himself on the journey. It's cool that we're now at the point where the bad guy is literally throwing entire solar systems at us. I don't know if I've really seen that anywhere else. Flying into the giant golden statue, Asura makes it to the event horizon. It's kind of a pocket dimension where Chakravartin lives. This is the final boss fight for realsies this time, and it's multiple stages, and of course it's very cinematic, but you've done this several times by now. Punch God in the face enough, and eventually he'll die too. Mithra begs Asura not to kill him, because if he dies, all the mantra will go away, and that means Asura will die too, but he's fine with that if it means she doesn't have to suffer anymore. With the cause of his daughter's tears finally dead, Asura's rage is gone, and his eyes are clear as he fades away. Mithra flies back to Gaia, and we get a scene of her telling the story of her father to the humans. It's a nice end to the story, and I thought it wrapped up most things pretty well. The only weird part is that I don't know why Asura would die without Mantra, but Mithra wouldn't because she's also a demigod. I assume maybe it had something to do with the Mantra reactor, but maybe it's because she's the priestess, or maybe Asura was just made of Mantra after he got revived. Anyway, in the epilogue, 870 million years later, because why not I guess, the 8 generals have all been reborn into a version of modern Earth. They're getting along pretty well until a huge meteor comes out of the sky and a reincarnation of Asura starts to transform with one of his eyes glowing white. The chapter ends with "to be continued," but at this point it might be fair to say that that was wishful thinking. There are 2 more pieces of DLC outside of the main campaign. It's 2 episodes of a Street Fighter crossover, the first being with Ryu, the second with Akuma. And I've never really been into Street Fighter, but it's still pretty cool. They start off as 2D fighting levels, and then they finish as 3D brawlers like the rest of the game. It's just a little bit of extra fun at the end of the game, though there is one section at the end of Ryu's fight where you have to mash buttons really fast, and I had to do that 5 times because I couldn't do it fast enough until I turned the controller sideways and put a separate finger on each button. It's that silly. But if you fail it, you start the second phase of the fight over, so that kinda sucked. The only other thing I have to say about it is that there's a critical attack you can use on evil Ryu that made me bust out laughing, and I just gotta show it to you. I mean, this face really says it all, right? This is some Rule 34 stuff, and my man is about to take it deep. If you've played any of those Bandai anime fighting games, you'll know what I mean when I say they're like 20% anime and 80% mediocre fighting game. Well, Asura's Wrath is the flip side of that. It's 80% anime, 5% mediocre fighting game, 5% tedious rail shooter, and 10% quick time event game. Every episode plays out in pretty much the same way. You fill up your burst gauge, and once it's full, you press the button to move the story forward. A flashy animation plays, usually with more QuickTime events, and the credits eventually roll. Every boss or larger enemy in the game can only be defeated by this attack, and that goes on for several hours. Combat consists of only 2 types of attack and a dodge that just kinda works. Apparently they initially didn't even plan to put a dodge in, because they didn't think it fit Asura's character. I'll be the first to admit that I am not the best at brawlers, fighting games, or much else in life, but in the beginning I was really putting in the effort with the combat. The animations felt cool, and timing that big punch in the QTE was nice. But as the game went on, I was doing worse and worse, not because it was getting harder, but because it was so repetitive, and I started to realize how little my performance actually mattered. You can completely fail a lot of the QuickTime events and the action will just go on without you. It only matters for the rating at the end of the level, and that rating only matters so you can unlock the true ending. But you can get that on the easiest difficulty with not very much effort. The bosses are awesome and full of spectacle, but a lot of the animation gets reused, and the waves of trash mobs are a slog. Mashing the X button always sucks. At this point, we also know that it's kind of an accessibility issue, but my least favorite part of the game is probably the rail shooting. Unless I'm standing in an arcade cabinet with a light gun, I've never seen these be fun. I don't think anyone even makes this type of game anymore. The last one I can remember was probably Panzer Dragoon. Even with these mechanical difficulties though, my biggest issue with the game is its pacing. Much like the man himself, Asura's Wrath is all rage, all action, all screaming, almost all the time, and you can't even relax and watch the cutscenes. This might be the first time in any game that I could say, I wish there was some kind of open world, because every single level in this game is except for the hot spring scene, and it's exhausting. A little bit of quiet, a little character growth, a little more focus on the time before the fall, and the grief that Asura feels underneath the rage, and I think it would have been a better game. If not that, I could still just do without the rail shooting and the QTEs and the trash mobs. If you reworked this into a boss rush style game like Fury, it would be an easy recommend. But as it is, I kinda wish that it had just been an anime instead. At least then, I could enjoy the scenery. Hey, do you think in Final Fantasy X zygotes count for sending? Like when a human dies, a summoner has to perform the sending so that their soul doesn't become a fiend, but is the same true for like a fetus? And if so, does it count for sperm? In every town Lulu walks through, does Yuna have to dance and then all the trash cans in the boys' rooms light up like the 4th of July? I hope someone out there knows because Square won't answer my emails. An eternal thank you to everyone who has subscribed, liked, commented, or just generally partaken in my videos. I hope that you can find more of what you like on my channel, but when you're done here, if you want to listen to someone else talk, maybe check out K Nova. I probably pronounced that one wrong too. Most of his content is centered around games with mechs, but I guess after this one, technically I do some of that too. It's good stuff, and even if you're like me and giant robots aren't really your thing, he keeps it entertaining, and it's still a nice watch all the same. Anyway, that's all I've got. As always, thanks for watching. Later.